Hello, I trust that you're enjoying your weekend. And today I'll be going through the third installation of the Your Millionaire Journey series that I've started on this YouTube channel. And this time around, we are trying to get someone who has a net worth of $100,000 towards their first $1 million. So this should be a very exciting episode for everybody, right? If you've been going through my previous videos, I started with getting your first 10,000 and then subsequently moving from 10,000 to 100,000, and now we're going to move from 100,000 towards $1 million. All right, and this is the third issue, and it's inspired by Nick Majuli's The Wealth Ladder, and the concepts in this book have been recontextualized to Singapore, and this third part of the series deals with your first $1 million. All right. Okay, so what have we done so far? If you've gone through the other two videos, if you are at this stage, you've basically completed your journey of getting your first $100,000 net of all loans, right? And it doesn't count your CPF. So this is a genuinely good achievement, right? And if you're able to do this before the age of 30, give yourself a pat on the back, right? If you don't get this done before 30 years old, it's fine, right? The important thing is that you're going on your journey and everybody has their own pace, right? So the metric that we'll be using for you to get your first million is going to be very simple this time, all right? It is simply all the assets that you have, your sums in the bank, your investment portfolio, minus off whatever loans you have, right? So this is a assets minus liabilities over $1 million, right? Now, you get to count your CPF this time. You get to consider the value of your residential property, but you have to net this against any liabilities that you have, right? And so by this stage, if you've not started investing aggressively, it is now time to take investment seriously. As in the previous segment, I talk about getting your brokerage account. Okay? And the central principle from the book, which is the title of another book by Nick Bajuli, is just keep buying. All right. And in this book, the central principle is to just keep buying income generating assets until you get your first million. But I think that there is actually a more general principle at play when I read the chapter in the book. All right. And I think this stage is all about getting new sources of income. For majority of the folks listening to me right now, even at $100,000, your job is still your primary source of income. So the question you want to ask yourself is, what new sources of income can you get, right, that will allow me to sort of get away with it, right? That wouldn't create any problems with HR, that wouldn't jeopardize your primary source of income that you still want to grow, right? You still have a career that you want to grow. So I want to introduce the concept of orthogonality. That means they are perpendicular to each other and they don't affect each other. So your main income, I've expressed this as a vertical line, right, on this diagram. And you can then supplement it with your investments, right? Your investments are orthogonal to your main income. So you can focus on your job while your investments grow the value for you, right? And on top of it, you have side hustles. And these side hustles, hopefully, they don't interfere with your main hustle. So you're not working for a competitor. You're just finding some other way to monetize your time after office hours, right? And this is almost like a four-dimensional kind of diagram. You are also getting a new source of wealth creation from the increase in the value of your housing, right? Which I can't express it as an orthogonal line in 3D. I have to just imagine that we have a fourth dimension of time, all right? Okay, so that's how we should be looking at our sources of income. All right, so since we are the topic of housing, I'm going to talk about where some of my ideas would deviate from that in the book. So if you read the original book, it considers buying a house sort of like an impediment to wealth creation, but this is in the US, right? So if you really desire a house that's really too big for your family, you end up overpaying for it, and it can slow down your journey towards your first $1 million. But in Singapore, the situation is different. Housing is a very important source of wealth for most of us. And I would say that for my father's generation, if you have people in the boomer generation, you find that most of their wealth is locked into their housing, right? They're all millionaires, but they're broke. Okay, they're asset rich and they're cash poor. All right. So how do we think about housing? Okay, now I think housing is something that you should buy if you want to live in that home, right? Most of the down payment when you get your first house is done through CPF ordinary account. So you are in essence increasing the returns on your savings beyond that 2.5%, right? So if I convert the sums in my CPF and the bank then loans me a certain amount of money, so it's a leverage kind of bet on housing property, and the house goes up in value, it is a very serious multiplier of your wealth, right? And on top of it, if you are married, the government will give you enough subsidies for you to pick up your first BTO. When I picked up my executive condominium with my wife, I had the full subsidy, right? So that's another reason to own another house. And furthermore, if you own your home, you can, via a property pledge, retain a lower amount in your CPF at the age of 55, right? It's totally optional, but at least if you have a house instead of renting, you can choose to keep a lower amount of money in CPF, right? So that gives you an added amount of flexibility as well, all right? Now, but the problem is this, right? While there are no guarantees that housing will be profitable, right? I think more or less getting your first home is fine, right? Do note that there were periods in Singapore history where home values are flat. They're not making any money at all for about, I think, a period of 10 years, okay? So do note that you should own your first home, but this cannot be your only source of wealth creation. To a lot of Singaporeans, this is the only source of wealth that they have, right? If you make this your only source of wealth, you will end up asset rich and cash poor, right? So overall, I still believe that housing is a very important source of wealth creation and will play a major role in getting you through your first $1 million. All right. So now we get to the bulk of what the book wants to talk about, which is to keep buying equity of businesses, right, in your investment portfolio. In this channel, you will find a lot of other channels that talk about explicit investment strategies like diversified portfolio of ETFs, forming a 60-40 portfolio, and I'm a very dividends focused kind of investor, so you find a lot of discussions on the dividend strategy in this channel, and you can look at all these other episodes if you want details on how to do this, right? And obviously my bias is towards portfolios with a minimum turnover, psychologically comfortable. That means it pays you a dividend, it gives you a dopamine rush so that you have an incentive to build your wealth slowly instead of, rushing for something that would double or triple in value, right? That's very hard to find, and it can often go down in value as well, right? Now, the whole point is to have a good, sizable investment portfolio, but it minimizes the cognitive workload on you so that you can focus on the primary source of income, which is climbing the corporate ladder, right? At 100K, you still have a long way to go in your career, and you should continue chugging along until you make your first $1 million. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about side hustles and why they're so important, right? We have 8 hours of work and then we have 8 hours of sleep. The final 8 hours, it's the amount of time that genuinely belongs to us. And how well we will do in our wealth building will come from how intelligently we deploy this last 8 hours of our time, right? And in this modern world, it is now full of possibilities for folks who want to monetize their spare time. You can, like me, build a YouTube channel. I have previously tried to author some books to make some money, all right? I wouldn't say that they're all successful, but I've been trying to build a personal brand for quite a certain number of years, right? You can also get royalties and patents Okay, and a lot of Gen Z, they are overemployed. So what they do is that they sign employment contracts with multiple companies at one go. All right, just make sure that you don't let HR catch you when you're doing that. But I think that side hustles like this is very important because if you get retrenched, you still have another job, right? So that's a survival skill. So the combined effect of side hustles and investment portfolio, your day job, and housing, if you do it conscientiously, you might be able to see your first million within a lifetime. All right. In fact, I wouldn't consider this very difficult. Your journey to your first $1 billion can also dovetail with the FIRE movement. Now, for a single person, you are more likely to attain FIRE before getting your first $1 million in net worth. Right? At the safe rate of withdrawal, you can get $2,000 a month in dividend income when your investment portfolio reaches 600,000. So you're more likely to FIRE than getting your first million. And that's very important because once you hit this FIRE milestone, all your earned income can be fully invested to supercharge the size of your investment portfolio, right? So this is how you dovetail your FIRE, right, into the journey of becoming a millionaire. All right. And so before I finish, I'd like to talk a little bit about how I did it. So for me, I felt that I was luckier than I was skillful, right? So if you're listening to how I do this, I would say that it's very difficult to do this, given that times have changed, right? And Gen Z and millennials, you're looking at a very different kind of workplace. Okay, so for me, I was able to start investing from getting my second paycheck. Okay, but I only had enough confidence to move my unit trust into dividend stocks after getting my CFA exams, right? I was kind of obsessive about, like, I treated this like a driving license, right? You don't drive until you pass your driver's license. But getting to the point where I can live on my dividends was not so hard, right? Once you find the usual suspects, SPH, DBS, and the earlier REITs that are available in the markets, it's not too difficult building up your dividends to the point where you can start living on them. And I was able to do that at the age of 32, right? That was actually superb timing because around age 32 was the time when the great financial crisis began, right? And during the great financial crisis, I lucked out again. I was holding on to a 5-figure monthly job. And at the same time, I'm living on my investment income. So what could I do, right? I farmed my entire income into local stocks, right? And at the depth of the recession, we're talking about yields of 18 to 21% a year, right? So it comes as no surprise that when the markets finally recovered, right, the people who are invested in the local markets all became millionaires, right? Now, on top of it, my wealth building didn't stop there. I carried on. I bought an executive condominium, okay, and the executive condominium, I bought it sometime during the GFC, but it was built after the GFC during the recovery. All right, so I had money coming in from the stock markets. I had money coming in from the valuation of the property that I got. Okay, right. At that point of time, I'm not a stock market guru. I don't know the folks who were with me at that time. I've lost a lot of money from my shipping trust investments during that time. All right, so it's really not about genius investing or figuring out how to do better. All right, in the stock market, I basically just went for anything that gave a decent dividend. All right, so having a leverage bet on an executive condominium was very important. So that means getting married is also very important. Okay, and getting the full subsidies played a significant role in boosting my net worth, right? And on the contrary, my side hustles such as book publishing, doing my blog, they really didn't do very much to increase my net worth. All right. It only started to come together after I became an investment trainer. But by then, I have long, uh, I've completed my journey towards financial independence, and I've already completed my millionaire journey. All right. So this is how I did it. I think a young person who wants to make your first $1 million, you have to come from a very different place. I think I've dropped some hints along all three of my videos in this series. But I think the hardest part is to find something that can consistently make you money and supplement your earned income, right? And you need multiple sources of income to get a good shot at seeing your first million before you're 40 years old. Okay? Okay, if you like my material, you can subscribe to my channel. You can buy me a coffee here, and you want to listen to my life story, Google ERM intro. You take the first link. This series is not over yet. I will be wrapping things up with a very quick discussion on what it's like to build your wealth beyond your first $1 million, which is the journey that I'm currently going through right now. Okay, and hopefully after that we would be able to take all the material, enrich it a little bit, and build a mini course around becoming a millionaire. So I hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.